Alrighty then. Today it is time to continue the little Halloween month. And today we're going to talk about what would happen if Jonathan became a vampire at the end of Phantom Blood. Now, if you're wondering what I mean by that, I mean this. So, around the ending of Phantom Blood, Jonathan was given the choice by Dio to turn into a vampire and to stay alive for a long time. But before he could even get that choice, he died. And even if he didn't die, he probably would have said no. Let's just be honest. But in this timeline, Dio is able to heal Jonathan's wound. He turns him into a vampire before Jonathan can fully pass away. Instead of stealing his body, he turns him into a vampire. After that, Jonathan and Dio are both able to escape the ship, and they both somehow survive to make it into the later parts. So, I'm going to talk about how this could have happened and what could have changed. So, starting off with Phantom Blood, I technically already said what I said. Jonathan would get the chance to become a vampire because Dio would heal him before Jonathan could fully pass on. Jonathan goes on the coffin, and to be honest, by that point, there's a good chance that Jonathan and Dio just died of the sun. Realistically speaking, since you really need someone to actually kind of become, a vampire, all that. So realistically, I assume because the vampire stuff, they died of the sun. Maybe there's some kind of counter. Maybe if you want to go the route, there's two coffins, which I think there were. Then have Jonathan and Dio close that coffin, and then Jonathan and Dio could still be alive. As for overall changes, well, Dio has no body. Him and Jonathan are working together. That's a big change. And Irina may actually become a vampire, so her and Jonathan can stay together forever, which I believe would happen. Now, at that point, George II, he's still born, like in canon, and he's likely maybe born a vampire, or maybe he just turns a vampire after Irina becomes one. Maybe in a few years' time, like when he's in his early 20s, he becomes a vampire. And realistically, all of that can happen. George II would not die because Jonathan is basically a vampire, same with Dio. And seeing how they're working together, I doubt one of Dio's minions would kill George. And even if they went as far as to go after George, I think George puts up a better fight and could survive. Overall, that's just part one, and I guess it's time to start part two because that's where all the big changes happen. So if we talk about battle tendency first, aka part two, I think the big change to come out of part two is the fact that Straits, or Straitso, whatever you want to call him, he never becomes a vampire, or if he does become a vampire, they just have an extra vampire on their team. Now, I guess when it comes to the Pillarmen, it's really two things they could do. Maybe Jonathan and Dio work together. I don't know why they would work together exactly, but maybe they decide to work together at the end to try to stop not Dio, but the Pillarmen. Another scenario is that they may actually try to become friends with the Pillarmen, seeing how they're vampires. Another question is, what about Joseph? And to be honest, I don't think Lisa would not become a vampire. I still think she'd be human. I think George and Lisa could have Joseph. And I think seeing how Dio was able to have kids with a human, actually 4 humans to be exact, maybe even more, but I digress. That's basically the entire thing. Joseph could still be a human because it's not a guaranteed. Is it possible that Lisa can become a vampire? Yeah. Her and George can both become vampires. And if they both become vampires, then chances are Joseph could be born a vampire, debatably. But that's hard to say. I don't really know how vampire x vampire birth works in JoJo. Kind of same as stand user and stand user. I don't know if it guarantees a stand or not. So I guess the same could apply to a vampire. So with that being said, that's already out of the picture. Joseph maybe is born a vampire, but I doubt he would. And he may actually know Hamon like he does in canon. I think seeing that Speedwagon would probably still be the same. I don't think he would become a vampire personally. Having more vampire and Hamon users, the chances are they're going to lose to the Pillarmen. But then again, I feel like if Lisa does have Hamon, like in canon, she would be helpful. George II could also learn Hamon debatably, and that would help. I get the vibe that Joseph and Caesar, they're both Hamon users. Caesar is not going to be a vampire in this timeline, and I think he could still die. I don't think he'd die, actually. I think with more allies on the group, Caesar actually could make it out alive. Um, I guess with Lisa's two guys, who I now know the name, Machina and Loggins, or Logans, whatever you want to call them, having those characters around, I think Logans, or Loggins, whatever you call him, he survives because if they kill AC/DC fast, with more help, they could definitely speed up the process and keep him alive in the long term. Caesar could also survive debatably, and I feel like by that point, Straits would also be pretty helpful because now he's still a good guy, even though he's a vampire. As for, I guess, tiering wise, I guess Straitso would probably be on par with Jonathan and Dio. Overall changes is that I could see one of them potentially becoming Ultimate Lifeform. Now, I don't think they would personally. I always get the vibe that Cars was going to be the Ultimate Lifeform by the end. I think that the story could go the same, but they would just have vampires. Jonathan and Dio could potentially die, though. But I don't think they would personally. And I do get the vibe that eventually Dio would have gotten a body, similar to how Stroheim got a cyborg body after he exploded. I could see them giving Dio one during or after the events of Part 2, which could definitely help Dio in the long term. Now, as for if Dio is a good guy still, or if he's now an evil guy, like how he was originally, I'm gonna go with the vibe that he's going to be evil behind their back. I'm not gonna go Dio turns good scenario because I've technically already covered that. And to be fair, I don't really want to repeat that one. The only change here is that they would just have Jonathan and Dio as vampires, and beating the Pillarmen wouldn't be as easy as it would be in the Dio turning good What If, because they were both hormone users, and if they don't have two hormone users, they just have two extra vampires. I mean, three, because Straits was on the team. It wouldn't really be too helpful. Overall, I can't say for sure who would be a vampire and who would be a hormone user. I can guarantee Jonathan and Dio and Straitso would become vampires. Joseph and Caesar are guaranteed hormone users. Lisa and George the second, I'll leave up to you. I could honestly see either happening, so that's all up to you personally at that point. I think I would probably just make them both vampire. I'd probably make Lisa a hormone user. George may be a vampire, but that's kind of it. I think now that we're in Stardust Crusaders, I think that's when all the big changes would happen. So by that point, Dio, will say, is a villain, but is secretly a villain. Kind of like a traitor. Kind of like what the original plot point with Fugo, but I digress. I think that would work the best. Whether or not Dio has more offspring, probably not. If I'm being honest, the big change is that Giorno wouldn't exist, but I'll talk more about that in Part 5. And same with 6, because Dio's kids wouldn't exist. Unless Dio's new robotic body can somehow give people kids. If that's the case, then maybe those four characters, they can still exist like in canon. To be honest, I think that's kind of it. I guess Stardust Crusader wise, Jotaro would not be a vampire in my opinion. That all depends if Holly's not a vampire. I don't think she will. She'll probably just be a normal person. I think Jonathan's gonna help the group because he's still around. Caesar, he's still alive probably, so I guess Rosanna and Julius could be a factor canonically in this story. I guess with all the other characters around, they could definitely have more vampires on the group. I mean, I only see Jonathan as the only vampire. Straitso, if he's still alive, he could potentially be an ally. George II and Lisa, I also believe would be allies if they're still alive, which I think they would be. Overall story changes. Dio could maybe become a villain behind their back, which can then lead to them kind of needing to look after Dio. And to be honest, and this is something I should have actually... Oh, crap, I should have brought this up earlier. Jonathan and Arena, or George and Lisa, could have more than one kid. So we could technically have more Joestars in this timeline. I'm going to go with the route where we still have where Jonathan and George only have one kid, just to make it simpler. But that's a route I honestly could have brought up. Back to the actual video in hand. I would get the vibe that the overall story is that Dio would be a vampire behind their backs. He would still be that evil scumbag, and he was able to trick Jonathan. Now, I guess when it comes to Joestar's Awakening, their stands. By that point, you could find some cheap plot hole. Maybe Dio is able to take some Joestar blood and put it into his new cyborg robotic body. And then by that point, maybe when he gets a stand, the Joestar blood that's in him somehow gets contagious. And I don't know, it's weird, but it could work. Holly could maybe control her stand if they decide to, if Jonathan puts his blood in her or something like that, like a blood transfusion, so she can become a vampire. And so the group can actually make it to take their time going to Egypt. If But then again, that would probably lead to Josuke dying, so Diamond is Unbreakable may actually be skipped as a whole. I think the overall story to change is that you would have Jonathan, who's a vampire. You would have George II and Lisa, who would be on the group. Joseph and Caesar, who I also believe would be on the group and actually could continue their hormone training, canonically speaking. You would also have Rosanna and Julius as Caesar's grandkids. And then you would still have Jotaro, Kakyoin, Polnareff, and Abdul and Iggy. Kind of the same group lineup like in the original canon. Realistically speaking, I think that all those characters together could have definitely helped out. As for who lives and dies, Abdul's death is probably going to be the same like in canon. I mean, is it preventable? Maybe if someone else just does it in his place, then yeah, Abdul could survive, but I doubt that would be the case. Whole Horse could also join the group, and that could just lead to the Crusaders surviving, like in my one video. If I'm being honest on who lives and dies, and I think when they find out Dio is a villain is probably in the castle. Then they find out Dio this whole time was evil. Jonathan's like, Dio, you tricked me. And then the whole time they can have a big fight, and Dio can master around a plan to get Jonathan killed by the sun. On a side note, I think that would be a very poetic ending if you want to go that route. I'd say Vanilla Ice Fight could end a lot quicker, so Iggy could survive. Abdul was killed like before the fight even started, so I don't really know how to save him unless someone else just takes his place. And to be honest, by the ending, I think Caesar would just be the one to take Kakyoin's place. Excuse me. Someone else could do it potentially. I personally get that vibe from Caesar. He would be the one to get Donut into the water tower, like how Kakyoin was in the canon. Joseph would probably survive, maybe. He still dies, but he gets brought back like in canon. George II probably gets a moment like that as well, maybe. If George is a vampire, he'd probably die at the ending. Jonathan would probably end up dying around the ending, though. I think a cool ending would be a parallel to how original Phantom Blood ended. Jotaro was able to destroy Dio's body, because he will. After that happens, Jonathan, the sun comes out, and Jonathan and Dio both burn out in the sun together, with Jonathan holding onto his body, with Jotaro watching. On a side note, Irina's still alive, so she debatably can awaken a stand, and if she awakens a stand as a vampire, she could help, and if I'm being honest here, she'll probably die. Maybe she can die revealing the world's power instead of Caesar, because Dio being a robot means that he could probably have the UV light hack and all that, so he definitely could have killed Irina, and she could die revealing the world's power instead if she has a stand. Either her or Caesar would be the one dying here, in my opinion. Jotaro would survive, and same with Polnareff and Joseph. They're bound to survive. I think Kakyoin and Iggy are surviving, unless Iggy gets an encounter with Dio. Julius and Rosanna are guaranteed to survive, because I really just don't see them dying. And Lisa, and George would also survive, personally. Caesar is a 50-50. Irina is most likely going to die. Jonathan and Abdul are guaranteed to die, in my opinion. And that's how I think Stardust Crusaders would go. Now, if we talk about Diamond is Unbreakable, like I stated earlier, Joseph may not have Josuke, and if he still has Josuke, and if Holly becomes a vampire at the ending, chances are Josuke's just gonna die, because they won't know he exists, because Joseph didn't know either. But assuming we go the right way, Holly doesn't become a vampire, she's still sick, they have to do the 50 days, all that can still happen. What changes? Well, in my honest opinion, I think Josuke could still have Crazy Diamond. I don't know if any of the other characters would have stands of their own. I don't know. I think that realistically, there's no more vampires in the overall story. I mean, George II, if he's still alive by Stardust Crusaders, I feel like by that point he'll just die in the final fight to Kira, personally. I mean, my fans kind of actually came up with their own alternative ending for that. Uh, to be honest, I guess when it comes down to that, George can just die in the final fight to Kira. Lisa would probably help. Whether or not she lives or dies, I'll honestly leave that up to you. Kakyoin would obviously come to help because he's from Japan. I think Rosanna and Kakyoin, they still hook up. Tenma's gonna still exist. He'll be around for Stone Ocean. Kakyoin and Rose can help in Stone Ocean, not Stone Ocean, but Diamond is Unbreakable for a little bit. And I really feel like Julius would probably just be with Polnareff. Same with Iggy. Caesar, if he's still alive, is gonna be with them as well. And to be honest, I don't really see how Irina would fit if she's still alive. Maybe she can be in DIU, but even then, she'd probably just be on the boat and really make small appearances like how Joseph did. I mean, she'd be a vampire, so she could technically go against Kira and all that. She could probably die to Kira realistically, seeing how Irina in her early 20s did look pretty attractive. I mean, to Kira, she probably would look attractive, so maybe she encounters Kira on complete accident and Kira kills her, which could be a very fitting end for Arena if you want to go that route. And to be honest, I feel like it just depends on who just lives and dies during Stardust Crusaders. I think there will be more survivors, but I think there'll be 3 casualties, with Abdul dying to Vanilla Ice and Jonathan dying at the end to sacrifice himself to Dio. And I feel like either Caesar or Arena are going to sacrifice himself to reveal the world's power. If Arena is still alive, she'll just die and go. And Diamond is unbreakable. I don't see. And if she does survive DIU, she'll never come back, in my opinion. I don't see her in Golden Wind, and I don't see her in Stone Ocean. But realistically, overall, the story really wouldn't change much. With the exception of extra help with the likes of Kakyoin around and Joseph, because Joseph continues hormone training. And same with Lisa, who would probably continue her hormone training, so there's a big plus on that. And I could see those characters definitely making the parts easier.
So, another change we can talk about is Part 5. Now, since Giorno probably does not exist, or it could, how would it change? Well, if Giorno does exist, if we want to go that route, then chances are Golden Wind would go the same, albeit there'd probably be more characters like Caesar, Julius, Iggy, more characters to help Polnareff out his story, actually. But assuming Giorno does not exist, well, Team Butcherati is a little screwed, if you get what I mean. So, to be honest, without Giorno, their team healer, the character who actually saved the day at the end with Requiem, uh, it'd be hard to do a lot of the fights. On the bright side, a route you could go with this is maybe have Giorno replaced by a Zappelli, which I guess could potentially work as a storyline. But then again, we don't know if said character would have a healing stand or gold experience or something like that. If they do, the story can go the same. If their stand can be a healing stand but works differently, like how Foo Fighters and Crazy Diamond does, then it would be hard to say for sure. But if they don't have a healing stand as a whole, then chances are the story would change a lot. Like, if there's no healer around, and maybe we have a new protagonist, maybe it's Zappelli to be the protagonist, well then, for starters, we're gonna have to... A lot of characters would probably be injured or die a lot earlier. So, characters like Abakio, who loses his hand, he probably would be out and bedridden for a while. Or probably even die as well. Fugo could probably still kill, Luzio. Uh, the other stuff of the story, Babyface, depends what the character's stand is, and that fight could honestly just depend on how the character uses their stand. So whether or not Babyface and Malone can win, I'll leave up to you. White Album, well, Mista kind of carried the fight, but with the new character around, it depends on really how they play their cards. Mista could probably die in this fight, so that's hard to say for certain. Abakio's death probably would still happen. Other stuff like Notorious B.I.G. could go the same, but the main character of the part, the new Zappelli main character, can replace Giorno. The final, like the Green Day fights, that stuff can go the same, I guess, if he can use his stand very creatively. Uh, Diavolo is where probably the big changes happen. It just depends on how he uses his stand. So at that point, without a healer, there could probably be more characters die in the earlier half of the story. Uh, as for my take on it, I'd probably give the character a healing stand just so we could avoid a lot of the bad stuff to happen. Without a healing stand, Mista would probably die in this timeline, and Bruno would probably also die. But then again, if you want to find a way to rewrite around it, maybe Jotaro could send someone to Morio, like someone from the else to go to Italy, and Josuke could maybe go, and then maybe Josuke can somehow get involved, and maybe Josuke could take that role as the healer. I don't think Josuke could heal Mista from being killed by Gacha, but I could see Josuke healing Abakio, so maybe Abakio lives inside of Mista, so I don't know. That may be a good, it's a bad thing. I don't know for certain. Depends on what I guess what the fans think. I think Naruto would probably survive whether or not there's a team healer because I think someone else like Iggy would take his place in dying. Bruno's death either happens earlier or I think Bruno would still die like in canon. Or Caesar could actually take his place and Bruno can survive. I don't know. There's a lot to come out of that one. But to be honest, someone probably could be prevented from death, like Maestro Naracha. Either Bakio or Bruno could survive, but that really just depends on how the characters play their cards right. To be honest, Iggy could die. Caesar also is gonna die, let's be honest. Polnareff and Julius, I think both of them can survive. They maybe die if you're being honest. Probably Caesar can become the turtle, and then maybe he could sacrifice himself later, and maybe Bruno could become the turtle, or maybe no one's the turtle, and maybe Caesar just dies, and Bruno can go back to his body with Julius and Polnareff, and then we can have Naracha, Polnareff, and Bruno survive this timeline. That's kind of one way you could go with it. I think there's a lot of scenarios that could kind of go out of this and Golden Wind as a whole would probably change a lot. That just assumes if Giorno doesn't exist. And since there's more characters around, it would be a lot more interesting to say how it would go.
Now, I guess when it comes to Stone Ocean, which is a big change, Jolene's still gonna be arrested like in canon. Jotaro's gonna bust Jolene out. He's gonna fail miserably, and then we're probably gonna get to have Tenmei in the story. Josuke would also get involved. I would see Okuyasu probably getting involved because Josuke's his bro and he'll help him out. Koichi and Rohan potentially could come, but I don't really know if they would or they wouldn't. And it's 50-50 there. I'll leave that up to you guys to decide. Joseph would probably help since he's training on Hamon. If Caesar's somehow still alive by part 3 and 5, he could help. Lisa could potentially help as well if she's still alive. I don't. It's odd to say, but I think Lisa could help. I could see it being a potential idea. Um, I guess overall changes to the story would probably be that I can't really say for sure who would live or die. I think six may in the same. It's possible, but at the same time, with more help around, because I also believe there's more characters to help. Polnareff and Julius, maybe they have kids of their own who help. I mean, it'd be hard for Polnareff too, but if you want to write it somehow into it, then sure. I honestly think it'd be kind of nice if Polnareff had some kind of kid from a one night stand before the battle with Diavolo. Polnareff can have a son or daughter from Italy and they can help. That would have been kind of cool. And then I feel like Polnareff would have a son. If he has a daughter, it'd feel like there would just be another armies on the group. If I'm being honest, son would at least add more character to the group. So yeah. And then Julius could probably just have a daughter who I'd probably make more quiet, kind of the opposite of all the Stone Ocean girls, in my opinion. Overall story changes. I think Hermes would just die in Foo Fighters' place. Weather Report's still gonna die. Raquel would turn good. Final fight, I'll kind of leave up to you guys to decide. I can't say for certain who would live or die. I think it could end the same like it does in canon, but then again, if they have more helpers around or new characters to help or old returning characters who are very strong to help, there is a good chance they could actually win, but that's if they play their cards right, to be fair. Pucci could realistically win and get the universe to reset like in canon, but however, he'd probably still die to Emporio. Pucci would have to do. I think the group would have to play their cards 1,000 times worse just to get to a point where Pucci can win. Is it possible? No, I honestly don't think that. I don't know. The team that we would have had, I think with additional fighters there, and those said fighters being very good, I just don't think anyone's that reckless to actually get Emporio accidentally killed, and same with Jolene. And even like the most reckless one, like probably like Okuyasu, even I don't think he's that much of a bonehead after DIU that he would actually cause more harm than good in a part. To be fair, I just don't really see many changes except the fact that there'd be more helpers. I'll leave that up to you for who lives and dies post Stone Ocean, I guess. And then maybe we can just get new parts in the OG world. If we don't, then maybe we can move to SBR with a more happy Stone Ocean ending, I guess. But that's just my take on it. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like and subscribe. See you for next week's Halloween video. And hopefully you will enjoy the next one.